Sometimes someone else's story can change yours. Subscribe to never miss a single frank, honest, and truly powerful story about love and pain. Make some tea and enjoy my captivating story. Let's go. Morning at Ardacha near Rus-Kamenogorsk began even before the horizon above the mouth had even acquired its first gloomy gray hue. I arrived in complete darkness. The key, old and well worn, turned in the lock with a familiar, almost intimate creak. The house awaited me, cold and quiet as if it itself were immersed in deep drawn-out thought. I loved this anticipation. It was a place where for a time I ceased to be Alina's wife and Alina's mother. I walked through the rooms, throwing open the windows. The heavy, damp air of the steppe mixed with the scent of pine needles rushed in. Dust danced in the sunlight as it streamed in, showering the old parquet with gold. Svetka, my daughter, had asked for simplicity, a cozy aesthetic, the current fashion in her blog. I understood this in my own way. I didn't bother ironing the throw. It wasn't new, the color of terracotta, with a pattern reminiscent of traditional Kazakh designs, slightly worn. I tossed it carelessly onto the wide, low sofa by the window. I arranged the pillows so they looked casual. One had fallen sideways, another had tipped at an awkward angle. This, I thought, is what life looks like when it's not glamorized. I placed a cup of cooling, strongly brewed black tea on the low, handcrafted table. I was almost done with it, but I knew it would look right on camera, not theatrical, but lively. Next to it was an old bronze sugar bowl I'd dug up in the basement, its metal darkened by time. I was wearing a thin, milky silk blouse, almost transparent in the light, and heavy, matte, perfectly tailored tent pants. My only accessory was soft leather loafers worn barefoot. I love it when leather feels just like that, weightless, like a second skin. It's my little secret, my personal weakness. I was just about to light a fire in the antique fireplace my husband and I had brought here many years ago when Sveta's message arrived. "Mom, I'm not coming." Marat would be there. He knew what was going on. Marat, the photographer Sveta had hired for her publicity, a young man of about 30 with a camera that seemed glued to his hand and with that slightly irritating metropolitan calm in his voice. I'd assumed I'd be helping my daughter, but now I was alone with this house, this fire, and this Marat. Half an hour later I heard the crunch of gravel. He stepped out of a dark SUV, camera in hand, as if he were ready to shoot at the first second. He leisurely walked up the porch, looking around, assessing the light, the shadows, the placement of the trees. I stood in the doorway to the living room, my arms crossed over my chest. There was something in my voice I couldn't quite place, challenge, resentment, or just excitement. "So what now?" I asked, almost playfully. Marat turned around. His face was relaxed, but his eyes were intense. That confident, slightly brazen smile that his clients loved appeared on his lips. "We'll do the shoot," he replied as if it were obvious. "Since the sets are ready." He walked past me without asking permission. I felt a wave of his energy, youthful, assertive, unwavering. "Just make it look pretty later with Photoshop," I said, following him into the living room, "like those damsels where every branch is perfect." He stopped in the middle of the room and turned around. Something flashed across his face that I didn't immediately understand, surprise, or perhaps sincerity. "Too beautiful. There's no room for improvement," he said, simply without any unnecessary intonation. But there was something in his tone that made me freeze. It wasn't a casual compliment. It was noticeable. "Don't make me laugh," I replied, but the corners of his lips were already twitching. He grinned and raised the camera. He looked through the viewfinder at the room, the fireplace, the blanket, and me. "Maybe you could tell me what your blog is about?" he asked, still holding the camera. "How is it about life?" I walked to the window and leaned against the wall. The light fell on my braid, highlighting my cheekbones and casting a shadow under my lip. "About self-love, about finding yourself when you're no longer 20, I replied, and my voice seemed to take on a new, suddenly awakened note. "It sounds serious," he said. "Life is serious," I replied, but now there wasn't an ounce of seriousness in my voice, only playfulness, only a wave that was beginning to rise from somewhere within. "Then let's show it honestly," Marat said, "without Photoshop as it is." And when he pressed the shutter, I felt he wasn't capturing an image, but this very moment, The moment when a woman who has lived half her life suddenly realizes she's been noticed as herself, not as a mother, not as a wife, simply as a person. The fire in the fireplace continued to burn, illuminating my face. I held the cup with both hands, though I wasn't cold. Marat circled around me. The lens captured my profile, the line of my jaw, the way my gaze slid over the treetops. "Take off that Terenberg shawl," he said suddenly. I'd thrown it on when I got out of the car. Out of habit, my hair would look better in the wind. I turned my head, meeting his gaze. A second of hesitation. Then I reached out and carefully untied the downy knot. My hair fell loose over my shoulders. I felt the cool air touch my neck, and the sensation was unexpectedly sharp, alive. Marat said nothing, but the clicking of the shutter became rapid, almost feverish. "Good," he muttered. "Now the chair by the apple tree. Lie down, as if you were just resting." We went out onto the terrace. An old wicker chair stood under a spreading apple tree, already beginning to turn yellow. I lay down in it, trying to find that fine line between naturalness and posing. I threw my head back, one hand on the armrest, the other on my stomach. Marat took photographs silently. I heard only clicking sounds, his breathing, the rustling of branches. There was something hypnotic in this silence, the feeling of his presence. Then he approached. "Footsteps in the grass." The blanket shifted slightly, he said. His hand touched my shoulder, adjusting the heavy, prickly wool fabric. I love this blanket for its weight and texture, but his hand didn't leave right away. It lingered on my shoulder, gently pressing the fabric against my skin. I felt my breathing slow, become shallow. Marat slowly moved a strand of hair out of my way, placing it on my chest. His fingers were hot. The contrast between the rough, heavy wool and his warm, smooth skin brushing the hem of my silk blouse was stunning. I opened my eyes. He stood over me. His face was one of professional attention. Or was it? We both pretended nothing had happened. He stepped back and raised the camera. Click, click, click. The air between us thickened, became almost tangible. I lay in the chair, feeling my heart beat a little faster. Something had begun, something that had nothing to do with Sveta's blog or Photoshop or Kusminogorsk. Just us. The next day I returned to Astana, to our big world, as my husband called it. After the quiet of the countryside, the rhythm of the capital seemed deafening. The meeting with Marat at the Dacha, that flash of inspiration that we both tried to ignore, left a strange aftertaste. I constantly caught myself thinking about his hands, how warmly and confidently they rested on my shoulder through the thick wool. Sveta, pleased with the first photos, decided the blog needed some movement, which meant a shoot in the city, a true street-style shoot. She chose the location herself, the old Nurly-Zhol railway station and the adjacent squares, a perfect contrast between the glossy modernity of Ostani and its busy, bustling interior. I prepared for this shoot completely differently. While the Dacha had been light and natural, here I needed strength and confidence. I wore a black sheath dress made of thick fabric that hugged my hips perfectly and fell abruptly just above the knee. But the real magic was in the shoes. I adore shoes. It's my second, more overt fetish. I chose pumps with a high, thin, almost menacing steel stiletto heel. The leather was patent, glossy, with a second light effect. The heel seemed designed to make a statement. Every step in them was a challenge. I felt my calves tense, my gait change, becoming sharper, more confident, more commanding. Marat was waiting for me at the entrance to the train station. He was dressed more casually than he had been at the dacha. Black jeans, a simple white t-shirt, and a light blazer. He didn't smile when he saw me, but his gaze lingered, first on my face, then abruptly dropped to the floor, to my feet. I felt his gaze like a physical touch. It seemed to me he appreciated not only the shoes, but also the way they changed the angle of my foot, the way they lifted my figure. "Arliken Alina," he said. His voice was drier than usual. "Slemets bi Mara, let's begin. We've begun." The first shots were taken against the glass walls of the train station amid a stream of people. Marat asked me to walk without looking at the camera, feigning busyness, a sense of urgency. My heel clicked on the polished floor like a metronome. It was my rhythm, my declaration. He asked me to slow down, stop abruptly, turn around, stand like this. His voice was quiet and commanding. Move your body slightly forward. Look down at your shoes. I did as he said. My head bowed. I looked at my feet, the tense arch of my foot, the glossy leather, the heel digging into the floor. Marat knelt down. He was so close to my feet that I felt my breath catch in my throat. He concentrated on the shot, focusing on the shoes, on how they looked against the color of my calf line. "This is very good, Alina. It's about control and tension," he whispered, and these words were spoken not as a photographer to a model, but as a man to a woman. It was a compliment that reached deep into my core, not just my appearance. "Control is important," I replied, feeling it slipping away from me. Then we moved into the park. He asked me to sit cross-legged on a low marble bench, my skirt stretched, revealing the perfect curve of my thigh. I felt him take my legs off again, but from a different angle. The heel dangled in the air, the fabric taut. I imagined how this image would look on screen, bold, a little dangerous, yet completely submissive, my personal fetish presented as a fashion statement. Suddenly Marat stood up, walked around the bench and sat down next to me. Our thighs touched and I felt an electric shock despite the thick fabric of my dress. "Svetka says you're not telling her. What's next on the blog?" he said, lowering his voice so passers-by wouldn't hear. "I don't know myself." I turned to him. Our faces were very close. "I'm just looking for Marat, looking for what I lost." "What exactly?" I couldn't tell him. "I'm looking for that part of me that believes it can be wanted." "Fire," I answered, touching his hands on the bench with my fingers. My touch was light, but intentional. "I need fire. Ostanino winters are too long." "Marat." He looked into my eyes. His gaze wasn't just attentive, it was penetrating. "Okay," he said. His voice became hoarse. "Let's find your fire. But to do that, I need to stop playing the confident woman. I need to be one." He stood up, took me by the elbow, and led me out of the park and into an alley where the wall of an old building was covered in graffiti, bright, chaotic, alive. Here he leaned me against the cold, rough wall. "Look at me. Don't smile. Show me how it feels when that heel digs into your soul." He didn't take it off. He just stood half a meter away from me. His body leaned forward slightly. I felt my breathing become heavy. I could smell him, expensive cologne mixed with leather and the metal of the camera. I feel that this is wrong, but I don't want to leave," I whispered. "What's right is what you want," Marat replied, and there was absolute uncompromising honesty in his eyes. He took a step closer. Instinctively, I rose up on my toes, balancing on my deathly stilettos to close the distance between us. He placed both hands on the wall, on either side of my head, blocking me. My body was trapped between him and the cold wall. It was a game of dominance, but in its purest form, at the level of glances, breath, unspoken desires. I felt his warmth, his strength. My calves trembled with tension from the attempt to stay in my stilettos and not lose control. "Show me this tension. In the eyes," he ordered. I closed my eyes. A few seconds of complete silence, broken only by the pounding of my heart. Then he leaned down. He didn't kiss me. He only touched his forehead to mine, the warmth of his skin, his breath directed at my lips. We were on the edge. My desire was so strong that I was ready to sink into the ground. "Your fire," he said against my lips. At that very second I heard a loud, confident sound, a click. He had managed to capture this moment, this pose, this tension on the edge. He pulled away, picked up the camera, and his professionalism returned as suddenly as it had disappeared. "Break, Alina, that's enough for today. This shot is perfect." I remained standing by the wall, trembling all over, feeling the cold marble and the heat of his breath which still lingered on my skin. I flew to Minsk, leaving behind the step wind of the Ostankino and the nervous tension that remained on the walls of the train station. Svetka, my daughter, decided that the blog lacks the European atmosphere of an old city, and I knew we both needed just one break. After that scene at the wall in Astana, Marat and I communicated only through voice messages. messages, dry and professional, but every phrase of his, even the most neutral, seemed full of hidden meaning to me. The shooting location was the old Volodskaya Street, now International, in the upper city, a cobblestone street, low, closely packed houses with stucco and an abundance of small, cozy cafes. For this part, I chose a look that was the complete opposite of the Ostankino aggression. I wore a long flowing dress of thin dark green velvet that enveloped me like a second skin, a deep yet discreet V-shaped neckline at the back which I barely covered with a thin lace stole. On my feet, instead of stilettos, I wore high flat-heeled suede over-the-knee boots, almost cat-like in their softness and silence. I love these shoes for their tactility, for the way the suede clings to my skin, creating a sense of hidden strength as if I'm ready for any maneuver. Marat was waiting for me, standing in the doorway of an old arch. He was wearing a leather jacket that seemed as old as the street itself. He didn't look at me as I approached. He was looking out at the street, at the cobblestones. "Why Volodkaya?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as neutral as possible. "Volodkaya, it's about echoes," he replied. "Here, every step resonates, every rustle is audible." We began working in one of the courtyards. Marat asked me to walk along the cobblestones, bend over, raise my head, and lean against the wall. The suede on my boots rubbed against my thigh, producing a barely audible muffled rustle that, it seemed, only I could hear. It was my personal sound fetish, this soft, intimate sound of suede rubbing. Marat knelt down to photograph me against the old wrought iron fence. "Show me how this velvet breathes," he asked. I slowly, very slowly, turned around. The fabric of my dress flowed. I felt the lace on my back drop slightly, revealing even more skin. The velvet was heavy and smooth, yet incredibly soft. "You're all tactile, Alina," Marat said. "You can't just stand there. You have to feel." He took my hand and led me into a dead-end courtyard. There was no sun, only dim light and the smell of damp old walls and fresh coffee from the establishment next door. "Sit on the steps," he ordered. I sank down onto the cold, jagged stone. The hem of my dress fell around me. I felt the suede of my dress tightly encircle my knees, and the sensation of protection and softness was incredibly intimate. Marat didn't take it off. He squatted across from me. His eyes were level with mine. His leather jacket smelled warm and something tart and masculine. "It's always so cold on Volodka Street," I asked, hugging myself. "Only those who are afraid to feel are cold," he replied, his voice almost a whisper, so as not to wake the echo. He reached out and barely touched the lace on my back. His fingers lingered for just a split second at the very edge of the neckline, where the lace ended and the warm, bare skin began. "This velvet, it's forbidding. It says you can't be touched," Marat whispered. "And you? Do you want to touch me?" The question escaped my lips before I could stop it. Marat slowly pulled his hand away. There was a struggle in his eyes, not professionalism versus desire, but something deeper, respect versus passion. "I want to capture your velvety strength," he said. He took a small, almost invisible bottle from his bag. It was dry perfume which he seemed to carry with him. He opened the bottle, and the air filled with the scent of leather, tobacco, and sandalwood. He carefully, intimately applied the perfume to my neck just below my ear, where my pulse beat strongest. His fingers lingered for a second. I closed my eyes, inhaling the scent. It was heavy, bold. He was Marat. "This isn't for the camera, Alina," he whispered, barely touching my cheek. "This is for me, so that you smell like the truth." I couldn't speak. My body responded to this touch, and scent, language, gestures, even gaze. None of it mattered. Only tactility and scent mattered. Suddenly, a loud, distracting sound rang out. Someone from the window across the street shouted loudly. Under a Belarusian garb, the moment was ruined. Marat recoiled. He quickly raised the camera. "Look at me," he commanded. "Show me right now that this scent is yours." Click, 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 I sat on the cold steps in velvet suede, smelling of his scent, and in my eyes, I knew it wasn't Alina from Stana, but a wild, indomitable woman whom Marat was drawing out, frame by frame, touch by touch. He put the camera away and extended his hand. See you tomorrow. I found something special for part 4. I stood up, feeling unsteady. He looked at me, and in his eyes there was a promise, or maybe, and a threat to change my life. After Minsk, I realized that every meeting with Marat wasn't just a photo shoot, it was an act of initiation. Like a skilled puppeteer, he pulled at the strings of my personality that I'd long forgotten. The scent of his perfume still lingered on the velvet of my dress, and I barely forced myself to take it to the dry cleaners. Marat chose not the tourist center for his next lion shoot, but the narrow, dilapidated streets where old buildings are hidden behind an abundance of rainwater pipes and climbing vines in the area the locals call Citadel. He called the day before the meeting. You need rain, Alina. You need moisture. I didn't ask what he meant. I just knew I had to match. This time I chose a suit that became my definitive statement. A black, tight-fitting leather trench coat with a wide belt, belted by Natalia. Underneath, a thin but thick A-knitted turtleneck. On my feet, not thigh-high boots or stilettos, but heavy, matte leather army boots with thick laces. It was a uniform. My personal fetish, connected with control over rough material and protection from the outside world. I adore the smell of new leather, its stiffness, and the way it creases and molds to my body. I found Marat in a dead-end street near one of the old abandoned Polish houses. A fine, stubborn Lviv rain was falling. The cobblestones were wet and slippery. The leather coat exuded a strong, tart, commanding scent. Perfect, Marat breathed as I approached, and the word applied to more than just the light. What now? Move? I asked, my voice muffled by the high collar. Now wait, he said. He placed me in the frame of an old wooden window. Rain pounded the glass. I stood motionless, the coat clinging to my body from the moisture, and I felt the material reacting to every curve of my body, emphasizing it. I felt my skin grow hot under it. Marat took his time. He walked around, capturing details, the sheen of the damp leather coat, the taut laces on my boots, a drop of rain trickling down my collar. He was working with texture. Alina, he called quietly, I need you to trust the material. Take off your gloves. I put on thin leather gloves that gripped my wrists tightly. I took them off. My fingers were cool, and now his voice was even quieter, almost intimate. Touch the cloak, stroke this skin, feel how it became yours. I slowly ran my palm over the wet, cold sleeve. It was tactile bliss, the hard yet pliable skin and its scent, the moisture. I closed my eyes. My fetish, the power of matter, was fully realized. I felt how the cloak, saturated with water and scent, became part of me, my protection, my weapon. Marat stopped in front of me. He lowered the camera. Turn your back, he ordered. I complied. The rain pounded the back of my head. I felt his footsteps approaching. He stood right behind me, so close that I could feel his warmth through the cold leather of the cloak. Sveta called me. His voice sounded right in my ear, making the hairs on my neck stand on end. She said she liked this dance of ours. I shuddered. She knows something. She feels something. Marat corrected. She said, Marat, Mom has come alive. Go on. You woke her up. His words were like a physical blow. My daughter knew, and she didn't stop. She encouraged me. Suddenly I felt his fingers on my belt. The leather belt was tightly cinched. Marat began to slowly, very slowly, undo the buckle. The sound of the steel buckle releasing itself from the leather was loud in the silence. You don't need to be controlled, Alina, he whispered. You need to break free. The belt slipped. The cloak opened at the back. I was wearing a thin turtleneck, and now that the cloak was unbuttoned, I felt the cold dampness of the air on my back. It was incredibly vulnerable, yet sexy in its candor. Marat couldn't see my body, only the thin fabric, but the act of release itself was intimate. He picked up the camera again. Gently, barely touching me, he turned me to face the window. Close your eyes. Feel the rain, the skin, the freedom, he commanded. I closed my eyes. The camera clicked. Click, click. Suddenly, I felt him close again. He didn't say a word. He simply leaned against my back. I felt his body through the fabric of his turtleneck and leather coat. Warmth, heaviness, presence. "We have one more shoot," he whispered. "It will be the most honest." He pulled away. I stood with my coat open at the back, soaked in the scent of leather and moisture, feeling the boundaries between us melt away. Where my voice was barely audible, Marat looked at me, and there was not an ounce of professionalism in his eyes, only hunger. "Where it all began, Alina, in your home in Astana, but this time without clothes. I felt the world spin. Without clothes. What do you mean?" My voice wavered. "I mean, we'll show your true awakening to the end, and that will be the last shot," he said. And at that moment, through the damp leather of his coat, I sensed in his voice not just a promise, but an ultimatum. I returned to Astana. The air here was dry and cold, completely different from the humid atmospheric air of Lviv, but the tension I brought with me was thick and palpable. Marat's naked ultimatum hung in the air like an unspoken promise and imminent catastrophe. I couldn't think of anything but this last shot, not how Sveta or the world would see it, but what it would mean for me. Our house in Astana was modern, lots of glass, minimalism, high ceilings, the perfect place for a reveal. My husband was away on a business trip for a few days. Sveta, at my request, stayed with a friend so as not to interfere with the creative process. We were alone with our secret. I waited for Marat in our bedroom. It was filled with a cold, wintry light. I was dressed in my most intimate, censored outfit, the finest ivory lingerie, almost invisible, and over it a long silk robe that I didn't tie, my third most delicate fetish, the smoothness and rustle of natural silk sliding over my skin. Marat arrived without knocking. He entered the bedroom, and our gazes met. There was no irony or doubt in his eyes, only a deep, focused determination. "I see you're ready for the truth, Alina," he said. "I'm ready for the last shot," I corrected. He set the camera on a tripod by the panoramic window. The light fell perfectly, softly, diffusely. He didn't start filming right away. He approached me. Slowly, I said, "No clothes on." "Not because I need new." His voice was low, "but because I need you to film the part." His hands settled on my shoulders, pushing the silk fabric aside. The robe slid to the floor. I was left in my underwear, feeling the icy floor beneath my feet and the heat of his hands on my skin. "Are you afraid of yourself?" he whispered, touching my lips. "You're afraid you're more than just someone's role. You're afraid you're a whole world." He gently, almost reverently, ran his palms along the contours of my collarbones, then lowered down my arm. I felt his touch awaken every nerve. He used tactility like a camera to capture my reaction. "Shot, Alina. I need a shot that will show everything that happened to you during these 5 meetings, at the Dacha, in Astana, in Minsk, in Lviv." He grabbed my waist, pulling me toward him. I couldn't move. His touch was my only anchor. I felt my body respond to him as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I'll film you," he whispered, "the moment you give me your truth." He let me go, walked over to the camera, and turned it on. "Go to the window. Close your eyes. Imagine you're back at the Dacha, and I'm standing there, next to you, adjusting the blanket. What do you feel?" I went to the window, the coolness of the glass. I closed my eyes. I felt the rough blanket, the smooth velvet, the stiff leather of the cloak, the soft silk, and it was all him. I feel that it's me," I breathed out. Marat wasn't filming. He simply looked at me, at the woman standing by the window. Her entire life, her roles, her fetishes, her passion were laid bare, though covered by thin silk. He stepped back, took the remote control from the camera. The last shot, the most honest. His voice sounded like a gunshot. He pressed the button. Click. At that very second, I felt something was wrong. I opened my eyes. Marat wasn't looking at me, but somewhere over my shoulder, and his face was deathly pale. I turned around. My husband, Danyar, was standing in the bedroom doorway. He had returned, back from a business trip earlier. He stood tall, wearing an expensive coat. His face was a mask. He wasn't looking at Marat. He was looking only at me, at the woman in silk lingerie standing in front of the camera. Daniel was all I could breathe. He didn't answer. He walked over to the tripod and picked up the camera, the one Marat had just used for the last shot, and before anyone could say a word, he raised it above his head and threw it hard on the floor. The lens shattered into 1,000 pieces with a crunch. The mirror in the camera cracked as if my reflection had shattered. The last shot was destroyed. Marat took a step forward. "Don't, Danyar. This is work." My husband ignored him. He was looking at me. There wasn't rage in his eyes, but something much worse, absolute devastation. "Your block, Alina. Your self-love. This is it." His voice was quiet even, emitting the chill of the Ostaninsk winter. I stood there shaking, feeling as naked and fragile as a shattered lens. My silk robe lay on the floor like a shed skin. "Go away, Marat," Danyar said, not taking his eyes off me. "And you, Alina, gather your things and your shards." Marat, stunned, quickly grabbed his bag and ran out of the room. I was left alone with Danyar among the shards of the camera, among the destroyed truth. I looked at the shattered lens. Was the last frame really in it, or was it in my husband's gaze in this absolutely cold denouement that had just occurred? A mystery for the audience. Marat managed to press the shutter. Danyar smashed the camera. Was even one photo from this final, most revealing session saved? And what was in it?